Well, welcome back. This is part B of our December 3rd, Lighting the Candle, A World That Works. And on the call today, if you were here for the first half, you know we've got my friend Lisa Sheehan, my friend Ken Caputo, also known as Ken's iPad. And we also have my dear friend Vanessa Lewis. So we won't go through an awful lot more here, but before we got to halftime, Vanessa saved her thoughts. And Vanessa, would you like the floor?
Sure, and no introductions needed, or did you want me to do a quick introduction?
I think you can just dive right in here.
All right, great. So basically, the thing that kept coming to mind for me with what Ken and Lisa and what you were saying, Bill, is just that what we resist persists. Have you guys heard that expression before? It's a common one, but I just and I think it kind of ties into what I mean, even just going by. I mean, I don't subscribe to the law of attraction, but I know one of the laws there is what you focus on expands, and so I think that goes along with that saying, what you resist persists. And so it's complicated, but I mean, my brain is complicated. Isn't all of ours, but with the social media just causing, and we've had this conversation a lot in other podcast episodes, social media, and even just being with our own like-minded people, and we're just talking about, like Lisa was saying, things that, she's listening to her family and friends talk about things they don't like. And they're not, one of the things that something personal about me that really frustrates me is when people complain and complain and complain, and then they're, and then it sets off a match and someone else is complaining, and yeah, I don't like that either, and here's why I don't like that, but then nobody's coming up with a solution. That's one of the things that has always really frustrated me. Maybe they're just venting, and there's a time and a place for that. I get that. And, and like one of the things, we talk about on the podcast too, is coming up with questions, and those questions are ultimately supposed to be leading us towards, at least coming up with an answer at some point. That's the reason for a question. And then the other thought I had was something that pertained to what Ken said, Ken's iPad. No, I'm just kidding. Ken, I was curious. I just, would you mind expanding? Okay, well, I'll just say one of the things, I've always been very fascinated by martial arts. And the reason is because the way the fight takes place. I've never actually studied martial arts myself. Well, that's not true. I did take Taekwondo when I was a kid, just for a few months or so. But then I decided white wasn't my color. So, no, I'm just kidding. But it just, I think somewhere along the line, I didn't feel like it was for me, but just the same, I was always fascinated by the whole idea of martial arts, and really because of the way the fight is not natural. It's when you resist something, like what you were saying, Ken, with, you've described the fight before, where it's like you're using whatever someone's resisting is what is ultimately going to come and knock them off their feet eventually anyway. Mm-hmm. So it's like, in any energy that they put forth towards someone else to knock them off their feet is usually the energy that's going to be used back by the skilled martial artist in order to knock them back off their feet, right? And so I just wanted to verify that. And then also, you mentioned the term shadow side, Ken, and I was just wondering if you wouldn't mind elaborating a little bit more on what you were talking about, shadow side. I don't know if the two topics are related to the fight of martial arts, or if you were talking about human nature in general, but I'm curious about that. So do you mind elaborating on that term, shadow side?
Sure. Yeah, that's something that I use a lot in classes that I teach, leadership and business classes primarily. And it's just, it's recognizing, so like we teach mindsets, based on the concept of 5 animal kung fu, like think Kung Fu Panda. And there's physical skills, but it's more about, like for example, the crane style. It's really good. You're kind of neutral. You use bone alignment and structure against a bigger opponent who's stronger than you. So it's very yielding. You deflect. So when we're talking about mindset, we talk about someone who is practicing the crane mindset, practices strong listening skills, being empathic. Some people are naturally like that. Other people, they have the capability, they just need to develop it. So one of the shadow sides of that mindset is an inability to commit, to be very kind of wishy-washy, to not stand up for yourself. So, so what we teach in leadership is look for something that's actually could be a strength. It's just expressing itself from the opposite side of the coin. So someone who is very quick to avoid confrontation, it's probably because they're very empathic. And, there's a strength to that. It's just not expressing as a strength, maybe because they haven't become skillful at it. And, and in martial arts, I was always taught nothing's hard. It's just new. And there's no good or bad. It's just skillful and less skillful. So, which is kind of a growth mindset approach to getting better at things. So, and we do the same thing in business. There's one class I teach about leverage points, and it has to do with some people are more likely to look for solutions. Other people are more likely to find gaps. They see gaps. So someone that's a solution seeker gets very frustrated with someone who's a gap finder, because they're thinking about solutions, and the person who sees the gaps just keeps pointing out all the things that are missing, right? You need them both, right? They're both skills. So sometimes they express in a way that leads to frustration. But if you go a little deeper than that, you find out that there's a tremendous amount of value there. It's just miscommunicated, and there's a skill that needs to be developed to turn into a positive. So that's why we just refer to it to the shadow side. We don't teach any positive tool without also speaking to the possibility that there's, like, I don't know, a symptomatic negative expression of that tool. So, and that's what I did with the fellowship thing. Does that help?
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of that DISC assessment that business people take.
Oh,
where
yeah.
They have, where there's, where you get to see exactly where someone's strengths lie, but then also, the flip, like you said, I like the term shadow side, but the flip side of those strengths. And then it helps you to, it's a great thought to have in mind with establishing a team, is you need people that have, that can balance each other out.
And the other part, actually, Benjamin Hardy wrote a really good book. It's called Personality Isn't Permanent. And he pushes back against all of those kind of personality tests and, the Kolbe's assessment, Myers-Briggs, all of those, because the challenge with them is you can start to identify as being a type of person or having a certain, fixed set of personality traits. And that's just simply untrue. We're very fluid. We change throughout our lives. So, so when we talk about the shadow, part of that is, look, any of these things you can develop, and we actually build a compass for people so that they can understand what their natural tendencies are, what their responsive tendencies are, and the areas where they could choose to develop if they wanted to. And it's not that they can't do it, it's just that they never really had a need to focus on it, So it's really interesting how it all fits together. And it's, I've done a couple of courses at UConn for grad students who it really flipped their whole paradigm, especially if they were in we work with one group that work in labs. So they would teach interns, and there was massive safety concerns here. So there's very, very strict protocols. And so they were kind of in this rigid environment, which made it hard to be flexible in how they taught people. So part of it was helping them to learn to look for how the other person was expressing things that they were frustrated with, and then finding, they're seeing the shadow side of their learning capability, and then flip it and find the light behind that, and then start speaking to that. And all of a sudden training got easier for them and more fun and less stressful.
So if I may, Ken, as you were saying, the DISC assessment, Myers-Briggs, all the rest of the personality inventories and interest inventories, they were an effort, and they had a great value to moving people ahead in terms of a diagnostic that they thought would be a reasonably good predictive analysis tool for when people interact with each other in the future, how you might be able to intervene and apply, what you've learned through the testing to something that may, reduce the discord and give them an opportunity. But it also was predictive in terms of how people would behave under certain circumstances, so that people spent more time looking to the model for an answer and less time interacting with the human beings. Where when you're talking about the, looking at if you do a SWOT analysis for a business, you do a SWOT analysis, which is strengths, weaknesses, et cetera, et cetera. The weakness part of but the weakness part of it is, do you know that since this is a weakness, there is a flip side to that, which is a strength, that because you have this weakness, it would be very small in terms of change of your behavior for it to turn into a strength. And it's a developmental tool as opposed to a diagnostic and predictive tool. It's one that's used to educate, grow, and increase the capacities and capabilities of a human being, as opposed to explain why they just did what they did.
Yeah, and it's interesting how it just it's kind of like multiple choice testing.
Yeah.
That was simply a way to sort out on a low order thinking level, immigrants coming into the country, how well they could speak English.
Yeah.
And it was never supposed to be used the way it's currently used. It was just fast and easy. Seth Godin writes about it, the history of multiple choice testing. And the guy that came up with the idea was a university president, I think Kentucky or something like that. And he's like, look, this needs to go away once it served its purpose, and he was fired.
Oh yeah.
So
it usually happens when you have a great idea, right? First of all, it's wrong.
I'll tell you, we developed the fitting room system for our vetting system for hiring, and over again, we hired humans that were aligned with our cause, our purpose, and they always surprised me at the transformations they would go through, and things that were completely counter to whatever a personality test would say. When given the space to be different or more or whatever, they would do it, and it was they just needed space for it. So it's an interesting thing. It can be, like you said, a great tool to kind of figure out where you're at. But if it becomes, if it ties you into a certain way of being, in the end, that can be detrimental to your own personal growth and the company's growth. Absolutely.
Vanessa?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And you know what? I think after what you guys have just shared, thank you. I think that those tests are, we're so curious. We have questions about ourselves. So they're called personal development, and they're used in the business, or were used in the business world. But maybe to try and identify, help an employee see what they'd be better at, or help an employer, be able to identify the type of employee that they're desiring for the job that they have to get done. But I think that really is just it just becomes a self-assessment tool. And I like what you said, Ken, where we can we're fluid and we can continue to change. And I think it's really important that you mentioned that ultimately those tests can do more harm than good, and they can actually limit a person's potential.
Want me to give you a real fast example? we do a little experiment real quick?
Sure.
This is from one of our leadership courses. So I'm going to give you 4 descriptions and think about which one sounds most like you, right? So strong, confident, direct, very protective of other people, and you like to deal with your problems head on. That's one. The second one would be tend to avoid confrontation. You're very empathic. You're a good listener, and willing to hear other people's point of view. That would be 2. The third one would be you're very creative. You come up with interesting solutions to problems. You tend to be a little unpredictable, do the unexpected. And then the fourth one would be you're very detail oriented, kind of a perfectionist, sometimes a little distant, not overly emotionally engaged. You can be a little bit transactional when you're dealing with problems, and you really just want the facts laid out in front of you so you can deal with it. So do any of those 4 resonate with you?
Can I pick 2?
2? Yeah, a lot of times there are 2. But there was more, there were some that, so like another way would, which one doesn't sound like you at all?
What if there's bits and pieces of all 4?
There always are. There always are. And we do this with, so what we did was we went through mindsets of tiger was the first one, crane was the second one, leopard was the third one, and snake was the fourth one. And we'll do this especially with teenagers. And usually there's one they kind of identify with. They hear the animal, they visualize the animal, and they're like thinking about that animal and how their mind works that way. And they can very quickly get caught up in the dialogue will start. What are you? I'm a tiger. Ooh, what are you? Oh, I'm a crane. And oh, wow, right? And what we do is we flip that very quickly to say you're actually all of them. It's just that one of them is a skill that you've developed over time and learned to trust. But any of these others you can develop as well. And truly the goal is to develop all 4. And that brings you to what we call the dragon, which is when they all just kind of fit together and they all work together in a complementary way. And you're just you now, So that would be an example. The personality test to me would be if you have strengths and things that you're that don't reflect in your personality type or whatever, those are areas that you can develop and become and just evolve yourself as a human.
So the question that brings up would be, especially when you're talking to kids, teenagers or whatever, where did you hear this first? Who was the person that noticed that in you and rewarded you for that way of being, And if they can identify that, then there's another conversation that's possible.
Very true.
For most people who walk around the planet, who haven't spent the time examining why they do the things they do, who they are, what they'd like to have, present in their lives, most of them describe themselves as, I am what I am. It's just who I am. That's how I am. Don't expect anything different because I'm always going to be this way. Where did we get that thinking, Lisa?
Well, I was thinking about just something as simple as horoscopes.
Yes.
Your astrology sign. And then you pick up on it and then you become it. And then I just started cracking up. I said, how could 12 of your, if you read your horoscope every day and 12 statements fit the whole world.
So in the Chinese horoscope, the year that you're born,
the whole year.
Right.
Confirmation bias.
We are doomed.
Confirmation bias, yeah.
I'm a bore, by the way.
Yep.
No, you're not. You're very entertaining.
Yes, absolutely. Great.
But I was thinking too of the the shadow side. I don't know what made me think. Well, I know what made me think of it, but in the tarot card readers, or now they've become oracle cards, and everybody and their brother has a set of them. But tarot, when it was the reverse, it was like the most horrible thing on the planet. I mean, I just remember that from movies and stuff. Well, not the reverse, but now with the oracle cards, there's always the shadow side, basically, is what it comes down to. So here's the strength and here are the weaknesses that can pertain to it. So I mean, it's kind of interesting in that way that they're giving both sides of a situation instead of so the shadow. I like that the shadow side's coming out and about more, and that there's strengths, like what Ken said, strengths and weaknesses to each attribute, and how they could be flipped almost instantly if cared to and intended to.
Can you imagine the leverage of a conversation like this with any human being? The ones who consider themselves, to be a Polaroid picture that the lacquer has been applied and they ain't never going to change. What if the question became not who are you and why do you feel that way? What if the question became who do you want to be and what are you willing to do to make that happen?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Where do you want to go today?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I had convinced myself that I was never a morning person, a night person my whole life. And everybody reinforced it for me. Everybody.
Mm.
Oh, you're a night person. Oh my God, she's not a morning person. Don't even talk to her, that kind of thing. And I embraced it for some silly reason. And then I read The Miracle Morning, and now I flipped it in my head because I like mornings. I love seeing the sunrise. I mean, there's nothing, I get more done, and it's the beauty to the beginning of a day, and how I fell into that trap that I set for myself, and everybody kept me there, or let everybody keep me there. So everybody is changeable.
Well, absolutely. That's always changing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to share, when I was in high school, every Saturday I slept until noon, did not get out of bed until noon. And so I had myself convinced when I went to college that the only way that I could have get to 8 o'clock classes in the morning is by working a job that was all night long. So I applied for a job as a night guard, and my job was to patrol, around 5 or 6 dormitories at the University of Colorado. I had friends everywhere, and quite frankly, that was the only way that, in my own mind, that I could make an 8 o'clock class. So interestingly enough, after that job ended, I continued hanging out with friends that we all stayed up all night long. Why? Because that's who I was. That's how I operate. That's what I do. Not anymore.
Oh,
when
Vanessa,
I was in college, I made sure I had 8 o'clock classes, but which I would frequently miss because I was this night person, not a morning person. But I made sure I was Phi Theta Kappa, so that I could miss as many classes as I wanted. Otherwise, you could only miss as many times as it met per week.
Very smart.
So that was a danger zone for me, but I
the
didn't
way around that is to be in the top 2% of your class. Let's do it. Yeah.
That's right.
I forgot to tell Vanessa about the mirror thing.
Yeah.
that was actually I use it kind of in everything, really. The idea is just to whatever's, if you're thinking in terms of like martial arts, like physical confrontation, if someone pokes you in the chest, you don't break their arm. If someone comes at you with a knife, that's a little different, so it's just reflecting back whatever they're putting towards you, and nothing more, nothing less. Right. So basically it's not actually you're not doing any harm. They're harming themselves, and hopefully they can learn from it. And not do that in the future. Personally, I use it much more. I've been in training the martial arts for 30 years and have managed to not be in a physical fight. Since I started training in the martial arts, it's interesting. I wasn't that fortunate before I started training, but but I use it more in just interactions with people. And the way I like to think of it is, if someone gives me a smile, I try to give them, that back at them plus 10%. If someone's yelling at me, I give that back to them minus 50%. So I kind of try to de-escalate like what feels like negative energy coming towards me, and then reflect back a little more of the positive. And in my head, I'm always thinking, what can I personally do to shift the universe a couple degrees to the positive? So I play with that ratio like that. So, so that's just a simple example of how it works for me anyway.
So your martial arts physical training has extended as I believe the martial arts does, right? It's meant to extend into your everyday life and the way you, well, I'll just say exchange energy with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And connect with other people. Right?
Yep. Yeah. For me, it is everyday life. I'm actually very uninterested in the physical, like the actual fighting part. To me, self-defense is not having a heart attack. It's, being a balanced person, having a strong mind, being healthy in my vitality, my relationships, and my contributions. And I've used it for that for 3 decades now. And that's how my teacher approaches it too. Bill's met him, he's in his 70s now and full of life and energy and enthusiasm and happiness, and yes, he could definitely beat somebody up if he needed to. But he's much more interested in providing healing and helping people live their best lives. So
you can't change someone's mind by beating their body.
No, of course, getting thumped a little bit's really good for your immune system, but not too hard.
If you've asked for it, it's one way to go. If you haven't asked for it, then...
Well, and talk about trust. When we train together, we're throwing each other on the ground, we're flipping each other around, we're making contact to each other once, and learning to basically entrust someone else with your health and well-being. That's a very powerful thing. So, so that's why we're very tight. We're all family in the dojo, because we've put each other's health and safety in each other's hands, and if someone hurts you, now they're going to have a responsibility to figure out how to restore that trust, restore that balance. So, so it's a cool, can be a very powerful environment. I've also seen martial arts schools where it's all about dominance and ego, and, getting hurt is cool. And that's not saying it's right or wrong. It's just different.
No mercy. Yeah.
Yep. Different fellowship.
So, and it really comes.
The heated kind.
Yeah. Vanessa?
Ken said different kind of fellowship. I said, yeah, the heated kind.
Yes.
Heated. Yeah. By agreement.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's, and that's exactly, I think that's the point, Bill. It's just that fellowship. If you're all agreeing to it and you've all learned to trust that that's the way it is and everybody's aligned with that,
So
what are you going to
those
do?
rules apply to the heated fellowship that you're talking about between two human beings at home.
Mm-hmm.
If you establish, what's okay and what's out of bounds before the rules are needed, then you always have a place to retreat to when neither person is comfortable with what's going on. That establishment and that establishment of the rules allow you to have an unsuccessful interaction without breaking trust.
Yeah.
Nobody ever wants to fight with a spouse. However, if you do,
happens.
Human
going all the way back, Bill, you were saying, what do you do about all of this? And what's interesting, we'll stay with the martial arts for a second. In the world of martial arts teachers, there's a constant bickering and argument about what the right way to run a martial arts school is, and it's very polarized. And in the end, what it feels like to me is it's judgment of something different from your view, especially if you don't like it. And when you don't understand it, it's the judgment part. If you let go of judging it, so I don't judge the fact that other martial arts schools approach the martial arts different from the way we do. That's their choice. And as long as they're being honest about that's who they are and this is why they do it, I don't have any problem with that. But if they're judging me, they can put me in a position where now I have to defend what I do. Right. So, but only if they're, like I actually don't care because they have no influence on my community and the tribe that we've developed, and we all agree to a certain way, and that's that. So, but how much of what we're experiencing right now is one fellowship passing judgment on another fellowship instead of first trying to understand their position? You know, you don't have to agree with it, but if there is an understanding, you know, then you end up where we're at.
It's being curious about what you don't know and setting aside and asking questions from what your initial assessment is that you haven't shared with anyone yet. Your reactions to the situation, as opposed to doing the investigation, doing the work to go and ask the questions and find out and check in. And that whole thing, and it's really the most difficult with a loved one. The longest conversations can go on for years between two family members. And what it usually means is that neither one of them was willing to be silent enough and ask enough questions of the other one until that person was talked out and felt fully understood. We have a lot of that going on in the world right now. I want to leave you with one more thought, that because we're talking about martial arts a little bit today, I have a very good friend. I haven't seen him in about 7 or 8 years, but he and his wife are both high-level black belts, you know, in their discipline. He's a 10th Dan, you know, in his martial arts, and the man that he studies with is the only person on the planet to continue training people until Jim does. But you know what you do when you're a 10th Dan? It's 100% conversational. It has to do with questions. It has to do with silence. It has to do with allowing something to come forth by being around each other. And I met this guy quite remarkably because I needed a locksmith. And it turns out he was referred by someone else. And you know what he did for his day job? He was in charge of pyrotechnics at Disney World. He was the guy that went around and supervised the loading up of all of the fireworks, you know, in all of the, you know, the different parks. He was the right guy for the job. I guess I would trust him with that. So the point is that even when you get to the point where you're a cooked human being and you're, you know, at that high level of mastery, there's always the search for what else can I learn? What else can I know? What else can I experience? And I just thought that was kind of cool. I thought, you know, when you get to a certain level of mastery, now you, I don't know, what happens to the physical side? You know, what happens, you know, there's nothing more in terms of additional kata. You've actually mastered everything from the physical side, and now all the focus is on what's going on between your ears. Sound familiar?
Oh, yeah. No, you see it in Tai Chi a lot. The movements get tinier and tinier. And really the physical movements are just to teach you to go to a place of center. You know, they're just the practice. They're not even really necessary, you know. So you do less and get paid more, you know, at least from the guys that I know that have been doing it for half a century. Yeah. You know, they don't have to work very hard. And they always got a smile, you know. They're just very, very balanced humans.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have just talked away another half hour. Hopefully the candle is being lit and the world is becoming a better place. With that all said, we say our sayonaras, our goodbyes, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen, arrivederci.
Adios.
All the above.
Bye for now, and thanks for stopping by, friends.
Next time.
See you soon.
Bye-bye, all. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, A World That Works, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can hear us at xvadio.com/podcasts, Apple Podcasts app, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and wherever you find podcasts.